Today's event is brought to us by Red and Collective and Namni Shah, who has been directly involved with Vijay's Australian tour. Red and Collective is a socialist organization based in Australia which aims to build international unity around anti-capitalism, ecology, feminism, and labour movement, and movements for social justice. It has a particular emphasis on building networks of solidarity with those in the global south. I believe our guest speaker, Vijay, today comes from the south of Chile. Thank you, and over to you.
Thanks so much, Surjit. And thank you, everyone, for coming. So many people came, but we don't have much chance. So as Surjit said, my name is Namni, and I'm from Red, and we're a fairly new socialist organisation working across Australia to rebuild anti-imperialist Marxism. And of course, thank you so much to Surjit for hosting this event and organising the venue, which has been wonderful. So it's my pleasure today to introduce you to Vijay Prashad, who is a Marxist historian, journalist, and thinker. And not too many people know, but the author of like 40 books, which is insane, and I've counted, I don't know how he's done it. His books include Washington Bullets, Red Star Over the Third World, The Dark Nations of People's History of the Third World, and his latest book with Noam Chomsky on Cuba, Reflections of 70 Years of Struggle, Revolution and Struggle. Vijay is the Executive Director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research and Chief Correspondent for Globetrotter Media. We are very lucky to host Vijay all across Australia. This talk is part of a series of talks that Red has organised through Sydney, Canberra, Melbourne and Perth. And at 3 p.m. today, we will be having a talk on National Liberation Marxism and Western Marxism by Vijay, which will be at the William McMahon Hall Theatre in Old Arts. Tomorrow from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m, Vijay will host a day-long teach-in on the topic of building socialism and anti-imperialism, which will be held at the Kathleen Fitzpatrick Theatre in Arts West. You can rock up or register, and we'll give you all the details, so if you're not sure where to go, please visit red-ant.org. So just a little bit about why we invited Vijay here today. As some of you may know, Vijay is an outspoken voice for true international socialism. Vijay has always challenged us in the West to actually understand and support the revolutionary movements in the global South, from Vietnam, Cuba, Venezuela, China, and also his home country, India. And before I pass over to Vijay, I'd like to just say a few words about India. So I was born in India, but my family came here when I was 3 years old. And being diaspora or an NRI is kind of weird, right? Because I've only been to India twice. But somehow India has, the history of India, the social and progressive movements in India have shaped my whole life in a way, even though I don't really have that much to do with the actual country. So something that was a real shock to me was my whole life when I was a child, my parents would always tell me, okay, a part of the reason why we moved was because when we were leaving India, there were riots. And my whole life I kind of knew a little bit about these riots, but my family's from Europe, and we left in 2002. So the reality is that when I was 19 years old, I was reading an RW Roy article, and I found out that these were not riots. In 2002 in Gujarat, there was a pogrom against the Muslim population. And it was brutal, and a part of it was either actively supported by the state or at least passively supported in their lack of action. And the chief minister at that time was Narendra Modi. Narendra Modi has become a little bit of a ghost who haunts my life. Someone from Australia. The last time I went to India, which was also only the second time I've ever been to India, they were debating and passing the Citizenship Amendment Act. And that was a big part of, there were massive protests across the country, and some of the student protesters against that act are still in jail today, from 2019. And that particular visit to India brought me to communism, it brought me to Marxism. Because growing up around a lot of South Asian girls, I used to think that being Indian meant like having strict parents and being told to be a doctor and knowing like 5 Karan Johar movies. But I have come to realize that this is a very naive view of India and also reflects a particular class and caste position. Instead, I have come to learn, and I feel so lucky to have learnt about progressive and revolutionary work that spans from Ambedkar to the Telangana and Telugu uprisings to trying to understand all the splits in the Communist Party of India, like which was which, learning about the massive labour organisations and seeing the photos where they've got the big, hammer and sickle flags and they're walking through the streets and there's massive rallies. So, with that said, you've heard more than enough from me and probably not interested in me anyways. So I will pass it over to Vijay Prashad. Please give a round of applause.
What a great story. That's terrific. Thanks a lot really to the university, to Sunjeet for allowing us to use this place, to Red Ant, Nandini, my dear friend Max Lane is hiding over there on the corner, one of the greatest reflectors on the Indonesian reality. It's really pleasant to be here. I wanted to start by telling you a story and then get into some of the analysis. In 1992, I was a reporter for a pretty right-wing newspaper called The Pioneer, and I was reporting on basically municipal matters. When you start as a reporter, they send you to the town hall and things like that to follow stories about rats in the sewage system and, very important issues for municipal governance. They always formed a section of the newspaper which was right next to the matrimonial section. So I used to hope that all these desperate parents trying to match their kids would glance over and read this earth-shattering story that I had written about some debate in the New Delhi Municipal Corporation. I also happen to have a family that's extremely political, either communists or fascists. So my granduncle was the mentor of the entire Delhi unit of the Bharatiya Janata Party, and he was a very senior member of the neo-fascist Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh. But he loved me a lot. He really loved me a lot. His birthday was in January. So in January 1993, in fact, during the riots in Seelampur, which I had been covering, Nandini said, well, they were not riots, they were a pogrom. I don't have time to get into what happened in Seelampur, but I had been covering that in the newspaper pretty regularly, and I'd come on Indian television because previously I used to work for New Delhi television, and so I had come on television to talk about things. And obviously I was extremely impacted by the things I was seeing. People being killed in the streets was a very much an impactful moment for me as a young person. So my granduncle invited me for his birthday, obviously January. And as normal, he forced me to sit next to him. He was a frail old man, very courageous, even though he was basically a neo-fascist. During the emergency when his organization was banned, he used to fly the saffron pennant of the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh from outside his window. And then his wife was going to jail when she was 100 years old. These are really brave people, but fascists, super fascists, like the top level fascists. Anyway, he invited me for his birthday, as he often did, and he made me sit next to him, and there was all these BJP luminaries there. L.K. Advani, who would later become the Prime Minister of India, Arun Jaitley, who I'm going to mention in a second, who would become the Home Minister. Deputy Prime Minister, Advani, Deputy Prime Minister, a whole gang of, the BJP upper level at that time. was there in 93. They hadn't yet tasted government fully. Advani had been the Minister of Information and Broadcasting during the emergency period, after the emergency period. So they had governance, but they hadn't tasted complete power yet. So at the birthday, the cake was brought out. You know, it's a hilarious thing. A bunch of new fashions, there's a cake, everybody sings happy birthday to you. And then my granduncle says, "Hum mandir wahi banayenge." We will build the temple exactly there. And everybody chants and they go, "Jai Shri Ram." And I was sitting right next to him. And at which point, what he used to often do, but this was really special because the top brass of the BJP was there. He then said, "This is my favorite grandnephew. He's the best boy of his generation in India. He's a communist, but he's the best boy. And, you know, he reads everything and whatnot and so on." And so, you know, I was sitting there horribly uncomfortable. Although I've never been the kind of person who says, "Well, you're a fascist, so I'm not coming to your house." I mean, I enjoy meeting all kinds of people, and it's curious, you know, what are fashions like when they're relaxing? So, you know, I never, and I also love them because they were older people, and you know, you have relations with people, you shouldn't be so petty. Let them be petty. We should be open-hearted. So I used to go for all this. Plus, they made really good food. So, and I was young and broke and working as a reporter, and coming from Singapore to a big bar. I was living in a one-room place, came there, it's luxurious, you know. Anyway, so Arun Jaitley at one point grabs me. Later he became the Home Minister of India. He was a real thug. He was before that, the leader of the student wing of the BJP, the ABVP, Akhil Bharatiya Vidyarthi Parishad. So Arun Jaitley grabs me by the shoulder and takes me out to the veranda. Now, you know, their apartment is a decent apartment, but the veranda had an extremely low wall, and it looked out on Janpat, and they were on the 3rd or 4th floor. So you directly fall on top of a Tibetan shop, you know, which lines Janpat on the other side. It's a pretty risky thing. Arun Jaitley was a big giant of a guy. I mean, I was extremely underfed and thin, and he was a big giant of a guy. He put himself between me and the, you know, like he was here, I was there, and there was the wall. So just one little push and I would have gone over. Arun Jaitley starts to tell me, you know, "Vijay, we read all the things you write and you come on television and you criticize us and you say all kinds of things and, you know, we follow what you're saying about what's happening. You don't understand the danger of the Muslims in this country." Oh, then he's giving me a really good ideological lecture. And then he says something to me which I think is pretty stunning. He said to me, "You know, you can write anything you want, it's a free country," which actually is interesting because given the crackdown of the BJP on a website that I had found on NewsClick, it's curious that he would say to me, "It's a free country, you can write anything you want." Anyway, it's a free country, he said, "You can write anything you want." He said, "You can write anything you want, but if you make fun of us, be careful." If you make fun of us, be careful. Those were the most chilling words I've heard. And I've been, you know, to Iraq and covered wars, and I've never been more scared than at that moment. That to me is the essence of Indian fascistic politics. That kind of bullying. If you make fun of us, be careful. It's a direct threat. I was a journalist with a press card. I was in my granduncle's house who just said I'm the best person in my generation. Yeah, he's a great kid. He's really bright, but he's a communist, but he's still good. And this guy takes me out there. He adored my granduncle. He was the guy who brought him into the, why would you bring this thug into your, he brought him into politics of that kind. And he says, "You make fun of us, you." That's a character of what I'm going to talk about today. It's important that you just get that sense of these are interesting people and they are in power. In 2014, it was pretty extraordinary when the BJP won a complete mandate. You know, India had, after roughly the 1967 election, with some exceptions, become a country of coalition governments. There were some exceptions. after the emergency, Indira Gandhi did extremely well after her assassination. There were some exceptions, but by and large, the electoral scene had become one of coalition governments. The BJP shocked everybody, actually. In fact, it was a shock in 2014 when they won a complete mandate. And then Modi was put forward as the Prime Minister. Now, Modi, as Nandini said, has had a checkered history. As a consequence of what happened in Gujarat, the US government denied him a visa for 10 years. He was not permitted to go to the United States for 10 years. Now, US government morality on anything is anyway doubtful, because after all they are participating in a genocide against the Palestinians. So I don't really take their position as a standard of what is or what isn't a pogrom. On the other hand, even they were so embarrassed by the evidence, largely that Modi's party was also killing Muslim Christians. They were so embarrassed by the evidence that they denied the Chief Minister of Gujarat a visa for 10 years. When he gets a mandate, of course he has to go to the US because he's going as the Prime Minister of India, not as Narendra Modi, Chief Minister of Gujarat and so on. So that immediately changed, but he came with a mandate. In the first term, Mr. Modi had been anointed by the Indian business community. Just before the election, they held an enormous gala event where all these people with, in a way, impeccable secular credentials, Ratan Tata, all these people came out there and they endorsed Modi. They didn't directly say vote for Modi, but they had this big fest, the Gujarat Fest for Business, saying, this guy knows how to make business shine. It was not really India shining, it was Indian business shining. He's going to make Indian business shine. In the first term, Modi's main discourse was about Vikas, development. That was the main push. He used the assets of the state very cleverly. What he did was, he personally took all the old social welfare programs, which had been, actually kind of essential for the survival of hundreds of millions of people who can't eat, without some assistance because the Indian economy is so badly organized. He took all those programs and he renamed them. His major push in that first year was to centralize himself as the giver of welfare. So they all became Prime Minister's Fund 4, Prime Minister's Program 4, with Modi's picture on them. This is actually a brilliant move of American-style political reorientation. So rather than actually start new social welfare programs, he just amassed a bunch of them into a new platform called the Prime Minister's Fund for XYZ, and people received notice that they were getting this directly from Modi. And what the BJP did, which was so clever and masterful indeed, is in certain key parts of the country. So for instance, there's a scheme, to give you an example, there's a scheme where the Indian government provides certain people at a certain level of poverty gas cylinders so they can cook in their homes. This gas cylinder scheme has been there for decades. It's not a new scheme. But the Modi government said it's a Prime Minister's scheme for gas cylinders. So poor families would get gas cylinders. The BJP got lists of people in neighborhoods who got the gas cylinders. And they organized those families into basically Prime Minister fan clubs. And they built upon the delivery of redistributed basic assets, redistributed that had been redistributed for decades. These families wouldn't have been able to afford either to buy a gas cylinder or get subsidized refilling of the gas cylinder. They were getting it from the state as they had previously. Modi centralized the whole scheme around himself, so he became the Annadata, the great giver. And also, they organized people who were getting this social welfare. This had not really been done before. This was very clever. It's an innovation of the BJP. So in states like Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, they created these sort of semi-fan clubs for Modi. This deepened Modi's appeal among sections of the upper end of the working class, lower middle class, mainly in rural, mainly in urban areas, in cities and so on. They entrenched the power of Mr. Modi. Personalization of Modi's rule in the first term was essential. That term goes to happy in 2019 that they would win an election, and they started broadcasting this as Modi 2.0. This was very clever. This is all almost American public relations people that were helping them. Modi 2.0. It sounded modern. It sounded better than Manmohan Singh's re-election campaign, where the Congress party started circulating his curriculum vitae, saying that, look, he's got such a great curriculum. He was teaching in Oxford, he was doing this, that. That was supposed to make people impressed with Manmohan Singh. So it's not unusual, this personalization of the prime ministerial candidate. India is not a presidential system. Nobody runs for prime minister. You run in your constituency. And having one a majority in parliament, a parliamentary group elects the prime minister. But over the years, in many of these kind of parliaments, the prime minister role has become presidential. People run, like in the UK, Keir Starmer ran for prime minister. I think it's a really undemocratic thing. It's unfortunate that this has happened. We're all sort of becoming presidential. And Modi came to that election, the second election, 2019, regally. He came above everything. He barely campaigned himself. He sent surrogates everywhere. Where he spoke, those were decisive, and those were live streamed in different places around the country. It's like the leader is speaking. It's kind of interesting model of politics. He didn't just run in his constituency in Banaras or in Gujarat. He ran nationally, and they had him everywhere. Big billboards of Modi. The candidate and Modi. The candidate and Modi. Modi was everywhere. And they started saying this is Modi 2.0. Okay, the BJP won again a second time. Pretty good mandate. 303 seats, I think they got by themselves in a 543 parliament, and they formed a government. This time, Modi basically started setting aside the alliance, the National Democratic Alliance, in the second term, and really governing more as his close associates in the BJP, Amit Shah and company, and himself. And they really drove hard the agenda of their cultural nationalism, or their Hindutva agenda, whatever you want to call it. They pushed hard to have a bill go through, which was incredibly divisive and unnecessary, called the Citizenship Amendment Act, which said that only those who are not Muslims, who live in neighboring states in South Asia, can get refugee status into India. Only non-Muslims. Now this is a curiosity, because I remember having a debate with somebody who was pretty high up in the BJP thinking world, who said, well, why would Muslims want to leave Pakistan? And I said, you people are so stupid. If you just look at the history of Pakistan, there are all kinds of problems. Ahmadis have problems in Pakistan. You're so stupid. You see all Muslims as the same. There are contradictions. The Shia sometimes get attacked in Pakistan. Why can't people come as refugees? You are so conscious of the greatness of India, and yet the whole Khalistani thing is growing in Canada, growing in Australia. I remember telling him all that. I was like, I want it. You think you've got it all made in India? Watch out for the growth of Khalistani politics elsewhere. He was like, you know anything, you're a leftist, you guys are irrelevant, you're urban Naxals, all of that. So he was sending me WhatsApp messages saying in big quotes, urban Naxal. I was like, are you 5 years old? It's like, you're a senior person in the BJP intellectual community, and the WhatsApp message you send is urban Naxal in all caps. Firstly, who writes WhatsApp messages in all caps? Somebody who doesn't know how to use the internet. And those people are actually dying away. Now people understand, don't send messages in all caps, you look like a nutcase. So anyway, at the time they really pushed hard on this agenda. In a sense, Hindutva was really shaping things for them. There was very, very dangerous activity going on in Uttar Pradesh, which is the largest state in India, where the Chief Minister extraordinary Yogi Adityanath, it's unbelievable. This whole thing about, cow's urine and, all this stuff is just like, I don't mind. If people want to drink cow urine, that's okay. I don't really mind it. You can drink whatever the hell you want, But to make for the Chief Minister of the state to pour milk into water when people are have malnutrition and can't get access to milk. So he's doing these ceremonies, pouring gallons of milk into streams which look disgusting. So the milk is not drinkable, just pouring it, he's doing some seva to, I don't know, the environment. I forgot what the reason was. He's pouring milk, and then the next thing is he's drinking cow urine. I mean, come on, it's just a really cruel way to talk to a public which is struggling with unemployment, underemployment. But they are really smart at creating wedge politics. So, in Muzaffarnagar, there'll be a little riot, homeopathic riot, far from the big cities. Now they understand, don't do a riot in Delhi, don't do a riot in Bombay, don't do a riot in Calcutta. If you do a riot in the big cities, it inconveniences the middle class. And the middle class hates being inconvenienced. They don't like traffic jams, they don't like riots, they don't hear about bloodshed. Do the riot in Muzaffarnagar. Kill 50 people, 60 people in a rural area, the message will spread. Kill some poor fellow going to, taking a cow to a slaughterhouse, just kill him on a high, walking on an embankment in a rural area. That lynching video goes viral, people see it, it emboldens the fans of Hindutva, others are scared, it chills the Muslim community. I remember even in Calcutta speaking at, there must have been like 100,000 people on the crossroads of two streets. I spoke there super hard against Modi, came down, and a Muslim guy who was selling water on the side came up to me and said, it's amazing that you can speak like that because I can't even talk in my family about what's happening. I'm scared to just talk to my family members, he said. And I thought, that is where the sense of chilling the public discourse has come. That was Modi 2.0. Of course, the pandemic hits, and that's its own disaster. I don't want to get into this in too much detail, but I really do want to argue, and this is the bulk of what I'll say today, is that even though the BJP comes back in the 2024 election, and despite the fact that Modi is the Prime Minister again, there is no Modi 3.0. This was manufactured fully by the BJP High Command office in Delhi. They wanted to go out there and say this is Modi 3.0. And the sad thing is, maybe not sad, maybe the obvious thing is all the media followed them. So if you just type into Google Modi 3.0, everybody, The Economist, Business Standard, everybody repeated that this is Modi 3.0. Now, why do I believe there is no Modi 3.0? After all, he's only the second Prime Minister in India to have a third consecutive term. That is pretty extraordinary feat. This is the 18th Lok Sabha. There was only one Prime Minister with three terms. Modi is the second. It's pretty extraordinary. But this is no longer the triumphant mandate. We are back to coalition politics. Two major Indian political parties, the Janata Dal United, largely from Bihar, and the Telugu Desam Party, largely from Andhra Pradesh. These two parties have given Mr. Modi the ability to go over the line and form a majority government. Without them, he would become a minority just by himself. Very interesting that they decided to come in, and I'll come to that in a minute. Because Nitish Kumar comes out of what would be called, I suppose, a kind of socialist tradition. He was a bhakt of Jayaprakash Narayan, comes out of the Lohiya tradition, if you know what that is, Raman Lohiya. These are anti-communist socialists from the 1940s and 50s, Jayaprakash Narayan from the 60s and 70s. Nitish Kumar was the student radical in the big JP Andolan, the big uprising of JP. He was alongside Lalu Prasad Yadav. These were standard bearers. In the 1990s, Indian socialism closed down its shop. They basically became the regional capitalist party. So in Uttar Pradesh, it's pretty sad that the Samajwadi Party, Samajwadi means socialist, so the Socialist Party in UP is one of the most corrupt capitalist parties, previously led by Mulayam Singh Yadav, now led by his son. So, this is not a socialism that we will remember. This is a kind of Gandhian anti-communist socialism, which played a very important role in India until they completely surrendered their ideology when India liberalized in the 1990s. It played a key role because they were part of the coalitions that fought to increase social welfare in India. not to build socialism or communism, but to increase social welfare. In a sense, the socialists or the Samajwadi tradition were a little bit like the economic liberals. I don't mean neoliberals, but they had a social welfare agenda. They were social democrats in a very, very clear sense. They were like European social democrats. They believed in expanding the welfare state, providing subsidies to farmers. And when they collapsed, it made the left's job very difficult, because the left had been the revolutionary tradition of organizing workers and peasants to build their power. With the collapse of social democracy, the left had to fill that space. So our lot suddenly had to be there fighting for more days of work for farmers, Manrega. We had to fight for Manrega. We had to fight for the farmers, for the Forest Protection Act. We had to fight for Adivasi protections. We had to be out of them. Things we would have done anyway, but now we were basically alone because there was nobody else. So a tiny Indian left had to fight to put these things on the agenda alongside social movements. But in the political sphere, the Samajwadi tradition had collapsed. So they joined, at least the Bihar branch of that tradition joins this third Modi government. And then the Telugu Desam party was basically a regional language-based national party, which was supported by the Telugu-speaking bourgeoisie of that central area of India, now Telangana and Andhra Pradesh. Chandrababu Naidu leads that party, is actually, if I was to write a biography or a dictionary of political terms, under the term opportunism, I would place two Indian politicians. One is Chandrababu Naidu, who is a classic opportunist, like he actually fits the description perfectly. The other is Yashwant Sinha of Bihar again. Atul, I'm going after Bihar a lot. So, yeah, but Yashwant Sinha was the amazing opportunist. Because I remember being on a BBC debate with him in '93, where he was savaging the BJP for what they had done in Ayodhya and so on. I was sitting there on the stage saying, I don't have to say anything. Yashwant Sinha from the Samajwadi tradition is attacking, I've forgotten who the guy was from the BJP, Murli Manohar Joshi, attacking him. And then suddenly he joins the BJP. Then he leaves the BJP, makes his own party. Then he rejoins the BJP. Then he leaves the BJP, but his son joins the BJP. I mean, this is classic opportunism. So Modi has cobbled together an alliance with two formerly semi-socialistic formations that are now basically opportunistic parties. Nitish Kumar of Bihar is an extraordinary adept politician who's dying to be the Prime Minister of India. But it just never works out for him. So what was interesting was, in the first budget Modi provided, you got to see why they accepted the deal. Because an enormous disbursement of the budget went to Bihar and Andhra Pradesh, including building a new capital. I mean, it is pure budgetary bribery. That's how he made a coalition government. So the first thing, it's a coalition government. It's not a mandate alone. What Modi 3.0? It's Modi, TDP, JDU 1.0. In fact, it's not a Modi 3.0. You buy into the BJP's own public relations hype if you accept that characterization, which has been repeated by The Economist magazine quite a few times. Secondly, it's important to note that after the election, the RSS, in its own newspaper organizer, ran a really interesting article where they criticized the BJP and said that because you didn't consult us, this is, you can see it's publicly available article, because you didn't consult us, you didn't bring us into the pre-election conversation, we decided not to work for you. Now, when I read that article, and written by a senior member of this neo-fascistic group that sits on the edge of the BJP, they are basically a grassroots neo-fascist group. The BJP is an electoral formation. So RSS actually has a greater touch with the grassroots than the BJP. If you read between the lines of the RSS leader's article, he's not saying, why didn't you consult us? There's something else going on there. They knew that the BJP was going to do badly in the states where the RSS is strong. Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh. That was their assessment. That the farmers' movement had had an impact in certain parts of India. It had turned people away from the BJP. Plus, the BJP's drama had not addressed the two key questions of the class from which most of the RSS pracharaks come, the RSS volunteers come. One, inflation, and the second, employment and underemployment. The BJP hadn't addressed this for that class, small shopkeepers and their children who were going to college and were getting jobs that were beneath their degree. So very much underemployed. Also, employment rate for that sector is pretty high. So BJP hadn't addressed one of their main, as it were, not their base, but their main people who go out there and do election work for them, go door to door and so on. So this guy, the way he wrote in that article, he basically said the RSS sat it out because they realized that their base, the RSS base, not the BJP base, the pracharaks were very unhappy with the BJP. So they didn't want to come in and say, we are all out for the BJP. They sat it out. That's really interesting and important. It shows you the enduring character of class politics in a place like India. That you can't just have a televised kind of politics on social media and so on. There are certain class realities that continue to interrupt, this liberal democratic dream that it's all about a big leader and so on. The contradictions of class keep coming back. And so with some of my friends who are in the BJP, I like to tell them, whatever you say, Marxism is still alive and well. Because we can analyze better why you lost 20% of seats, but your vote share only went down by 0.8%. Why did the vote share only go down by 0.8%? Because in a large part, this was an anti-incumbency election. Where the BJP had been incumbents in the state government, they lost. Where they were not incumbents, like in Orissa, they smashed the Biju Janata Dal, which was in power in that state. So this was largely an anti-incumbency election. There's a lot of space, therefore, in India for different kinds of politics. It's not, I fundamentally disagree with people who say, this is like, there's a fascism in India. There's no fascism in India. There are contradictions all over the place. And there's a lot of space to transform the system, the society, and so on. It's not flattened, by a bulldozer called Modi or the BJP. There's a lot of contradictions. Those contradictions are coming out most apparently in the arena of foreign relations. When the Russians invaded Ukraine, the Indian government refused to condemn it. Why? Because Modi, not necessarily driven ideologically, but pragmatically, couldn't afford not to import cheaper Russian oil, couldn't afford to import cheaper Russian oil, because if we had not got that cheaper Russian oil, if we had to get oil from, let's say, Saudi Arabia, the prices would go even higher. In order to maintain food price inflation at a reasonable level, the Indian government just has to import discounted Russian oil. But that doesn't mean that Jaishankar needed to be so aggressive when he went to the United States. It shows the contradictions. You see, India is reaching a point, and I think this has to do with national confidence, not Modi or the BJP. We cannot conflate these things. There's a kind of national confidence that comes from not India itself or the BJP, but across the global south. There are some changes, and we can talk about this in the Q&A. But when Jaishankar says, for instance, we're not interested in the NATO mindset, he's not just speaking from India, he's certainly not speaking just from the BJP. This is appealing across the global south. Lots of countries are now coming to the point we want to put our national interests ahead of the interests, say, of the Washington Consensus. Our national interests should start prevailing. It's very small steps, and you see small indications of it, not really anything dramatic. Very quickly, this government that's there now is going to face a lot of challenges. On Unity Day, National Unity Day, what is that? Yeah? When did they start this National Unity Day? I don't understand why this government has decided to make a national. It sounds ridiculous. But on National Unity Day, which you only make a National Unity Day if you're feeling uneasy about national unity. If you're confident about national unity, you don't do a National Unity Day. This is not a sign of national unity. It's a sign of, they don't know what's going on in Mizoram, they don't know what's going on in very many parts of the country, so you just fabricate National Unity Day. Modi gives a speech where he attacks. He says, we've defeated Naxalism, Maoism in the countryside. They have come to the city, so we have to go after urban Naxals. Remember that thing that the guy wrote to me in all caps? Urban Naxals. Yeah, go after the urban Naxals. Why they're saying that is that popular movements in India continue to germinate and grow. The farmers' movement was the most public of the lot, but there are many movements that are afoot. The sense of lack of confidence in the ability to defeat Modi should be washed away. I'm very much more optimistic that, okay, here it comes. Then in about 20 years, there will be space for India to deal with some of these contradictions. The contradictions are alive and well. Caste contradictions, gender contradictions, contradictions of region. There are states that are extraordinarily angry with what's happening in New Delhi. I doubt that the AIADMK can ever win again in Tamil Nadu easily. At least, at the state government level. Lok Sabha, they'll always win in areas where they are extremely strong. But the regional question, the language, these contradictions are alive and well. And they open the space for an enormous amount of political activity. And of course, that's where the tiny, minuscule, almost destroyed left comes in. And I hope nobody asks me a question about the left. Because then I would go on for like 2 hours about that. Here's the bottom line. Mr. Narendra Modi is back in power. They have the same cabinet that they had in Modi 2.2. It's almost like a continuation. The very same cabinet. In fact, it's extraordinary. The fellows in charge of national security and so on, Ajit Dovan, they're all the same. They didn't change anything. The help they gave, or the seats they gave in the cabinet to the Telugu Desam Party and to the Janata Dal United are not consequential. It was basically the money in the budget, I think, that caused the deal. It's a BJP government. So that is in fact true. But the agenda they are trying to move seems so inchoate. It's very interesting. I'm just saying it like this because it's hard to cast a judgment in just about 140 days of a government. It's a massive government. Modi does exactly what he always does, which is anytime there's a crisis, he gets on a plane and goes off. After the reduced mandate, rather than face the press, he zipped off to Italy. He wasn't even invited to the G7. India was invited as an observer. He got on a plane and left India, so that he didn't have to face the Indian press, which he never really does. He's not keen on press conferences. But his surrogates come and they talk, and they are extremely weakened by what has happened. So what is the agenda that they're going to place? It's going to be very interesting to watch. Already, these shifts in foreign policy are starting to have some impact within India. People feel that their government is no longer subordinated to the United States. That's interesting. Will that open space for new kinds of struggles? India is no longer that keen on the strategy of encircling China. In fact, India's lack of keenness was so much that the United States has basically sidelined the Quad, which was India, Australia, Japan, and the United States, and they started the Squad, which was Australia, Japan, United States, and Philippines. Because the Philippines, they feel under Marcos is much more of a reliable anti-China ally. India is sort of dithering. Partly it's the BRICS, partly India does see the economic advantages of trade with China, which Australia will never see, because this country has no independent foreign policy. Hasn't had one since those fellows landed in Sydney Harbour, was first subordinated to the United Kingdom and is now subordinated fully to the United States. You're building runways for US bombers with nuclear weapons and other gifts you're giving the Yankee because you are subordinated to them since the Treaty of San Francisco. Congratulations. But India is in a different place now. Pragmatic things are interrupting the ideology of the BJP. But the BJP ideology won't go anywhere on its own. It will have to be struggled out of the majority mindset. It will have to be struggled out. And that struggle is ongoing. There has not been a categorical defeat for India within us.
questions and discussions. So you can go on and on about the left.
No. Let people ask questions, yeah. Suji, there's a hand up.
It's 15 minutes.
15
Oh,
minutes. 30, 40 minutes. It's a mathematical problem, man.
Indian time.
Indian time. Is impatient, one here, one there. How's that? Should we start like that? Should I take the question?
Take the question?
1, 2, let's get 3 questions at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Chalo, okay.
I just wanted to welcome you to this land where the Prime Minister of the country, whichever party he belongs to, is the unofficial head of the overseas friends of the BJP. So you feel very welcome.
What a great statement. His name is Albanese, right? That one. Yeah. Thanks a lot. I'm really. So the issue is, if you didn't hear this, that whoever is the Prime Minister of Australia is the honorary president of the overseas friends of the Bharatiya Janata Party. What a great country, guys. What a great country. Amazing. Aye. Yeah, no, you, yeah. This is that question I don't want to answer. Okay. Next question. Chalo. Okay. Yes, sir. Yeah.
You spoke a little bit about the regional parties in the South. You mentioned the Telugu party. Could you say a little more about what scope the regional Southern parties have? You did seem to sound optimistic that they would play a great role.
Okay. Great question. Number 3. 4. Because his wasn't a question, it was a welcome. Welcome to the land of the BJP, he says.
Welcome to Australia. My question is similar. He started some issues with writing and his campaigning, and he's really aggressive campaigning, marketing really. What really brings them to look themselves forward? In contrast, against that.
Yeah, why are you guys interested in the land? There's barely any members of parliament from the land. Okay. Atul, you want to come and answer? Thank you, you say. I'm saying thank you. Okay, let's first deal with the regional parties so I can prepare. The regional, you said something interesting, which is one regional parties, then regional parties of the South. So let's start with the regional parties of the South. India is a pretty extraordinary place for how it's organized. The initial debates after independence, or rather the debates that started in the early 1940s when independence was on the horizon, they began to consider, how do you organize this country? Should it be by administrative blocks? The British organized it effectively by when they conquered kingdoms. Like when they took Awadh, they called that the United Provinces. When they took Sindh, they called it Sindh. And then it became Punjab, the whole Punjab. And that's a funny joke because, the British came to colonize. Firstly, after Australia, I go to London and I am heart sick about what's happening to the UK. Trains are not running properly, whole country, everything is deteriorating. It makes me extremely sad to see that. Because if England is not looking good, it makes me think, how did they defeat us? Like, shouldn't they be a great country to have come and defeated us? But certainly those fellows knew their classics. So the guy who came and took Sindh, he sent a one-word telegram to London. The telegram said, Pekavi. You all learned this in school. Pekavi, which apparently is Latin for I have sinned. Bad Bengali joke put by an Englishman named Napier, Lord Napier. So India that they inherited was largely based on the organizational principle of conquest. There were lots of sovereign states, Hyderabad, and so on, Travancore, lots of sovereign states. But there was also like the Madras presidency. It was based on on the timetable of conquest, in a sense. But how does an authentic national project organize effectively a multinational country? Because India is a multinational country. I was trying to explain to others, that there is no national language in India. You cannot, it's a really offensive thing to say that there is a national language. There's an official language for government functions. The official languages are for parliament and paperwork and so on. There's no national language in India. India does not have a national. There are languages of states. So Hindi is not the national language of India. That's what the BJP had wanted to propose. But states like Tamil Nadu said, no, our language is Tamil. That's our state language. India is organized on the principle of the linguistic principle of states. These are linguistic states, not ethnic states. Even though the right emerges after independence in Maharashtra with an ethnic claim that Maharashtra is for the Marathis, not true. Maharashtra was designed for Marathi speakers, and there were lots of non-Marathi speakers in Maharashtra, but it was the majority Marathi speaker area. Initially, after independence, Maharashtra and Gujarat were one state, one large state. Those were two languages. Then there was a reorganization, and Gujarat was separated. Gujarati speakers, it's not an ethnicity. This is not a racial, ethnic division of states. It's all done initially on linguistic lines. The problem is that is the essence, by the way, the linguistic nationalist sensibility is the essence of the state political parties. So even when the Congress party was a hegemonic national party, the Congress party in Tamil Nadu had a Tamil sensibility. It was different from the party in Gujarat and so on, because it had to appeal to people there. There was a nationality question that was placed right from the 1950s, when people committed suicide on this question, in particular Tamil Nadu, saying that we don't want the imposition of Hindi. These words, imposition of Hindi, is an enormously divisive concept. Imposition of Hindi, nobody wants that. In parts of the northeast of India, there are a number of local languages, but also people say we prefer English. And that has to do also with the role of Christianity in that part of the country. It's a very complicated thing to administer. A country like India is very complicated to administer. In many ways, when I think Humayun Kabir or somebody in the 50s said it's the United States of India, or it's like all of Europe. It's like all European countries in one. That's India. Well, the BJP, when it arrives, founded in the north of India, the Indian right wing has actually had a hard time organizing for the first 30-40 years of India's history. From 47 to roughly the 1980s, no real right-wing party consolidated itself. The Bharatiya Jana Sangh, the forerunner of the BJP, founded in the 1950s, was a North Indian party. It had a character of, in fact, not even North India. It had a character of Western India. It was people from Bombay section, Maharashtra, Gujarat, some from Madhya Pradesh, from the areas where the RSS was strong, Delhi, and so on. That was the bastion of the Bharatiya Jana Sangh. The other right-wing party in India is now long forgotten, the Swatantra Party. That was a hard right businessman's party from the metros. None of the right parties had any role in India till the 1980s, till the Indian National Congress started to liberalize the country. Once they opened for foreign investment and they gave up centrality of social welfare, the right came in. Because when the Congress started to move right and move the country rightward, then it became clear that the right-wing parties are a better place to vote than the Congress, a more authentic right-wing party. And so the BJP starts, but it still largely has a cultural orientation of northern India, still, north and western India. So that's their base. Because they are so heavy on Hindi, and the Hindi imposition question, even though many of them are Gujarati speakers. So Modi and Amit Shah talk to each other in Gujarati, but they still believe in one language, National Unity Day. They said, again, one language. This is anathema to southern India. So south of the Vindhya mountains, the Godavari river, that area, there is is an antipathy to the BJP. There's only one state in South India where the BJP actually does well electorally, and that's in Karnataka. And that's because in Karnataka they play the caste equation extremely cleverly. There's an intense caste, the Lingayats and that whole story in Karnataka has its own dynamic. But even in Karnataka, the BJP party is a caste patronage party. It's not a Hindu nationalist party. It's a BJP, but it's not like the BJP in Madhya Pradesh and so on. Right? So the regional southern issue, it's like a wall against saffron. They are not really able to break through. Every once in a while, they make clever alliances and win a seat here and say we breached the wall. But it is not possible for the BJP, for instance, to sweep Tamil Nadu. The Dravidian political culture is much too strong. Tamil nationalism is much too strong to allow the BJP to come in. But this is not only the South. This is also in other areas of India. That without making very clever tactical alliances, the BJP would not have prevailed. In Assam, it's a great example. There is no rational explanation for the BJP to root itself in Assam. But 40 years ago, when I was doing these reports, the BJP started to say that all the people who lived in the slums in Delhi were infiltrator Bangladeshis, Muslims who came through the northeast. And then so there were several attacks at these slum dwellings where people lived. And in fact, the hilarious thing was not hilarious. The strange thing was many of them were not from Bangladesh. They were not. Some were from the northeast, some were from other places. But the BJP used this anti-immigration thing to make inroads in the northeast. That has endured. So there are lots of regional contradictions that are important, I think, to look at. You can't look at it only nationally. India doesn't have a national politics. Its national politics is built from the regional parties. The left must be understood broadly. I mean, India is a country of, to quote V.S. Naipaul, not that I like any of his books, but this title is good, A Million Mutinies. India is a country of a million mutinies. Wherever you go, people are upset about something. There are protests all over the place. The farmers' movement was extraordinary. That was not a random set of anarchic protests. It was built by farmer organizations. The left farmer organizations, certainly All India Kisan Sabha, but also community organizations, Gurdwara associations, all kinds of groups participated in building that. It was one of the most important mass movements in the last 10 years in the whole world. Every year in India, there is a strike, a general strike. 250 to 300 million workers go on strike one day. Every year. That continues. The whole thing of precarious work remains a live issue. There's so much distress and anger that emerges sometimes in these, anti one community or the other riot. And that anger that comes out in very ugly ways is part of an anger at the society that's provided for people. It's not some anger that is primordial. It's anger at the society that's there. There's toxicity that is built into the Indian structure. I mean, we have a pretty ugly culture. Caste, patriarchy, these things are ugly. I always disagreed with my teachers used to say colonialism, provided, constructed this. No, we had an ugly culture for a long time ago. Our caste system was not made by the British in London. They happened to use it. Right? That's some ghastly thing that still sits there. The nature of Indian patriarchy wasn't created by Victoria. It was inherited from caste structures and all kinds of wretched hierarchies. So, there are millions of mutinies. The left parties are struggling to find a way to both do the work of social democratic parties, remember that space of trying to fight for relief for farmers and so on, and to build the independent strength of the working class and to fight each other. These three aspects are extraordinarily draining. The people who join the left, we have been in the left, I've been in the left movement for almost 35 years. Our movement draws in people who put everything into the movement. They sacrifice everything. It frustrates me always when people dismiss the left. You don't recognize what the left is comprised of. It's not made of a pamphlet to try to make India decent. And at least one should give them some solidarity without smashing them. When I read things online, the CPIM is this, the CPI is that. I mean, guys, calm down. The CPIM is made up of peasants, workers, intellectuals, a whole range of people who sacrifice their leisure time to try to make India a better place. Now, you have a better way you want to do it, go ahead and do it. That third aspect, people just gutter sniping each other, such a waste of time. It's time really to build the unity of these million mutinies and build the independent strength of people who don't have a voice in the parliament. Those are the three questions. One more. Let's take two and I'll make it one. Yeah. Yeah, please. These are good, short, yeah. Two more quick ones. Or one or none. One, the lady back there, yeah. And then there's another lady back there. They got their hands up before you see.
So during the CA protest, I was in Norway, and the protests over there were very romantic as compared to the ones happening in Delhi, because Shiv Sena was at that time was saying, hey, guys, we're going to protect you. So the police was actually protecting us now. And then suddenly there was a switch between the halfway and so I guess I just wanted to know a little more about that switch, because people were trusting Khatib and then they stopped trusting him and they started trusting him again, and now he's out of the equation altogether. So just wanted to know a little bit about that.
Amazing. Okay. And behind you. Okay, great. And it is possible to put it together. Yeah. Firstly, next month in November, our institute will release a dossier on the concept of corruption. And I highly recommend it. It's a critique of Transparency International. The corruption debate in India was created by a right-wing social worker by the name of Anna Hazare. He introduced the concept of corruption with a sort of dramatic hunger strikes and various things to attack not the big bourgeoisie, not the big business, but to attack the politicians who are not in the BJP. So this was a constructive discourse. I mean, come on, every politician is corrupt. If the camera wasn't running, I could tell you some fantastic stories of bribery. But I can't compromise people I know. But corruption is, and what is corruption? How is it that when I give a bribe to a politician, that's corruption? But when a big business doesn't pay taxes, that's not corruption. I mean, Mr. Adani owns ports in Gujarat. He owns the port of Haifa. He has a stake in the Dubai port, and he owns 2 ports in Greece. Mr. Modi made a big deal of the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. That whole was not an India, Middle East, Europe corridor, it's an Adani corridor. He owns all the ports. That's corruption. Me slipping, 500 rupees to a cop to prevent getting my car impounded, how is that corruption compared to that, where the national wealth is being given to one guy? So the whole idea of corruption is completely politicized. This is not to say that slipping money to a cop is a good thing. But I mean, if you don't pay public servants a decent salary, you don't train them in institutes of public administration, this is what you're going to have. I mean, the outcome of the IMF insisting in reductions in public employee salaries and then the closure of our institutes of public administration. When somebody joins the police force, they need ideological training. They need to go to a 2-week camp where they learn what it means to wear a uniform and all that stuff. They should be proud of their great history, all of that. We don't do that anymore. There used to be institutes of public administration all around India. All people who did UPSC exams, who got into the services, would go through ideological training. I remember lecturing at the Foreign Service Institute in Missouri, and there's one right near JNU. You go there and explain the origin of Indian foreign policy. All of that is vanished. So you have a country with, It used to be when in the earlier period in India, you did well in the UPSC exam, the public service exam, the top choice people had was for the foreign service, most prestigious. Today the top choice is for customs, police, and one more that's about driving. This is a direct indication of the caliber of what's happening to the services. But this is partly because public service salaries are gone. 11th pay commission raised salaries. There was a dramatic raise. We used to see on college campuses. Professors used to come on bicycles. After the 11th pay commission, they started driving cars. It changed the character of the professors. They had a different class orientation. All the Marxists became post-Marxists. It does make an impact on you. Suddenly you have savings and you want to buy a holiday house, and it changes your orientation, your sense of, the 2 chapatis, dal for lunch disappears. Suddenly you're, driving out to eat at a multi-cuisine place down the road. You're not eating in the mess with the students. Oh, that changes the culture of everything, yeah? So corruption, it's really very, very ideologically used as a concept. Transparency International was set up by these scoundrels from Germany in the 1990s, basically to delegitimize the state and to say they privatize everything because states are corrupt. And now we look at, oh wow, transparency has said India is here or Zambia is there. It's completely fraudulent. The whole index is designed by surveys of business people who tell you the experience of corruption. How is that a ranking system? It's completely fraudulent. And yet the World Bank uses it, IMF uses it, probably the Australian government uses it. When they give overseas aid, they say, oh, this is a corrupt country, no aid for them. It's crazy. We bought into things without investigating where they come from. And so here we can go to the Shiv Sena, which is in fact the first authentic Indian Hindu nationalist right-wing party that actually took power, because they emerged in Maharashtra as a Marathi fascist organization led by a tremendous speaker, Bal Thackeray. He was such a good speaker that he decided to change his name to Thackeray after William Makepeace Thackeray. He thought he was a great writer, so he put that as his name. Bal Thackeray was an incredible speaker. I've heard him speak a couple of times. Now he's dead. He was fascinating. He would just rile up the crowd, and he always attacked Tamils. He hated Tamils for some reason, the Tamilian language. He was like, cannot hear Tamil on the streets, blah, blah, blah. They emerged as an anti-immigrant party. That was their essence, and a regional Marathi nationalist party. And they have a problem with the BJP because they hate the fact that the BJP has entered their territory of Maharashtra. That they should be the governing party of Maharashtra, and the BJP should honor their historical control of Hindu nationalism in that state. This is basically an electoral fight, a fight over resources by 2 strands of Hindutva, one from Maharashtra, the other which is much more national. So that withering is there. But also, when a party is the inheritance of a father to a son, it all depends on the son's orientation. Now, I remember because of that strange connection, I remember once meeting L.K. Advani's children. And I was just stunned that they were completely, they went to, I think, modern school, I think. They didn't speak Hindi. They were interested in whatever pop music. And, there was nothing BJP about the kids. And Bal Thackeray's son also, there's extremely little Marathi nationalist about him. He's basically holidays in London, skiing in the Swiss Alps, that kind of thing. So you hand over a party to a kid like that, he doesn't have Bal Thackeray's authentic Marathi hate. He doesn't possess it. So he's all about elections. He's not about this great hater of India, who I admire because he hated authentically. He was real, he was sincere. He wasn't an opportunist. I detest opportunists. If you believe something, believe it. If you are hateful in your belief, tell me you are. Let's fight about that. Opportunists are the worst. They don't believe anything. And in our world today, we are inheriting politicians who are increasingly not believers in anything. They are mediocre and pathetic. your Prime Minister included. They don't believe in anything. What are they? How can we take orders from them? We want people who believe. And I really hope that at least the younger people here will learn to believe and do things because they believe in it and they trust themselves. Not because somebody is telling them this is what you should do. Trust yourself. Be good to yourself, authentic, not insincere. Thanks.